No, I don't think so.
The house. That Ethan actually wrote out for math.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our September Board of Education meeting. Can everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And I do ask everyone to remain standing after the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can everyone please remain standing, please? Okay, tonight it is with heavy hearts that we share the tragic news of a beloved member of our school community whose life was cut short in a motorcycle accident yesterday. Let us take a moment of silence to remember Michael Rampinelli, his kindness, his spirit, and the love he brought into our lives. Please join me in this moment of reflection. Thank you, everyone. Please take a seat. Okay. Next on the agenda is the recognition of our All-State student musicians. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Hale, our coordinator of Fine and Performing Arts, who will lead us in celebrating these talented individuals and their outstanding achievement. Dr. Hale, all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers, Ms. Cheng, and the Board of Education for the opportunity to recognize these students this evening. This year was another great year for our Syosset musicians. Each year, students who are in the 10th and 11th grade across the state attend NYSSMA to be adjudicated at the highest levels, where they hope to be recognized among their peers as all-state musicians. For the past few weeks, I've been keeping a low profile among my colleagues in other districts because the results for our Syosset students have been nothing short of impressive. This year has been, as Dr. Rogers so eloquently put it earlier today, an embarrassment of riches. I was on some group texts with some of my colleagues in other districts, and they said, how many students in Syosset get into All-State this year? And my response was, a bunch. So then they asked me to be more specific, and I told them, a whole bunch. But this evening is a night that we can truly be proud of our student musicians and of our music program, which is nothing short of a juggernaut. To put it in perspective, from the 56 school districts in Nassau County, there are 291 students recognized as all-state musicians. I'm proud to share with you that from that number, our students were recognized 51 times. In other words, 1 out of 6 all-state musicians in Nassau County, the most competitive county in the state, come from Syosset High School. This is a result of the incredible effort and dedication of our students over many, many years. It's also a result of the phenomenal support of our music parents in this community. And of course, the secret sauce is that we have a robust and comprehensive K-12 music program with the best faculty you'll find anywhere. So it is with tremendous pride and pleasure that I introduce to you the 2024 Syosset All-State Musicians. I'm going to read your names. If I read your name, if you wouldn't mind just stepping forward and giving us a wave. Many of the students couldn't be here this evening because, as you might guess, they're at a rehearsal, but they send their regards. So we'll begin at the top. We have Aaron Liu, clarinet, Aiden Chantemson, violin, Albert Zhang, double bass, Alice Huang, vocal alto, Andre Huang, violin, Angela Zhang, flute and piccolo, Ashling Hui, viola, Ayan Kazachi, bassoon, Brian Kim, violin, Cadence Chen, viola, Charles Freeman, trumpet, Cody Cheng, cello, Daniel Chen, violin, Darren Lung, bass clarinet, Derek Huang, violin, Elena Serber, vocal alto, Elliot B., vocal bass, Emily Tang, alto saxophone. Ethan Schwartz, violin. Gianna Affatado, violin. Hira Mehta, vocal alto. Helen Zhang, violin. Ian Chard, trombone. Ivory Sang, clarinet. Jesse Namkung, tenor saxophone. Joe Funatomi, clarinet. Joshua Kim, cello. Julia Ri, viola. Kenneth Chen, viola. Lisa Yazanov, vocal alto. Lydia Hong, flute and piccolo. Marcus Hoshino, vocal tenor and violin. Margaret Zhang, vocal soprano. Mehmet Merkin, French horn. Nandika Sahatra, vocal soprano. Nikhil Shah, alto saxophone and tenor saxophone. Olivia Kim, viola. Oscar Wang, tuba. Ryan C., B-flat clarinet. Samuel Gerson, vocal tenor. Sean Lim, violin. Thea Chen, viola. Valerie Liang, violin. Vane Trivedi, double bass. William Shi, trombone. Zihan Zhang, violin. And Ziwen Zhang, vocal alto. Ladies and gentlemen, our 2024 All-State musicians.
Let's just give them another round of applause. Congratulations again to these talented musicians. And at this point, we are going to, the board is going to move to the stage to start our meeting. And you are more than welcome to stay for the facility bundle presentation, or otherwise this will be a great time for you to make a graceful exit. Thank you so much. Okay, now we are going to have the approval of minutes for August 26, 2024 board meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Brickle, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Dr. Rufo, may we have the Treasurer's report and appropriations adjustments, please?
As shown on the Treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end July 2024 was $72,439,589.14. It shows that bank balances for all cash accounts were reconciled to the book balances and were collateralized in accordance with the district's banking agreements and investment policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rufo. And can I have a motion? Mr. Rotolo, second by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, next on the agenda, we will have Mr. David Steinberg, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Curriculum, Instruction and Assessment, and Dr. Janelle Wojcik, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Curriculum, Instruction and Assessment, who will present the ESSA federal grant programs.
Okay, good evening, Dr. Rogers, Dr. Curry, and the Board of Education. This evening, we'd like to provide you with a very brief overview of our ESSA Title Grant funding. So as you know, ESSA stands for Every Student Succeeds Act, a federal education law which specifies how states and schools use federal grants to support school district programs. The law emphasizes equity in education for all students. There are 5 different title grants. The allocations are formula-driven and based upon the number of low-income families district-wide. Syosset is eligible for 4 of the 5 titles. Title V grants are intended to support schools in rural areas, which we do not qualify for. Our total ESSA allocation this year is $401,840, an increase of approximately $40,000 from last year. Title I-A and D, this year we have 2 parts to the Title I grant. They're intended to support academic programs that provide all students with an opportunity to succeed. Allocations are provided to Syosset and in-district private schools, as well as Mercy First, a not-for-profit social service agency servicing families and children in need. Under Title I provisions, we are required to use a formula to designate schools within the district as eligible for receiving Title I funds. This year, we have 4 elementary schools designated as Title I schools. This includes Robbins Lane, South Grove, Bayless, and A.P. Willits Elementary Schools. We use these funds to support existing programs. Each school has the same programs regardless of the source of funding. This year, we'll use Title I Part A funds to support our reading program and services offered in our Title I schools. This money will offset the salaries for several developmental learning specialists and provide professional development in the area of literacy. We are required to hold some of this money to fund our supply reserves for homeless students, and additionally, we're required to share a portion of the funds with Mercy First, who plans to allocate the funds for academic remediation and vocational skills training. Title I-D is new to us this year, as we have 3 students attending Mercy First who qualified under this provision within our district. Title I-D grant funding will support those students as they prepare for their future by providing skills and training to attend college, vocational school, or to secure viable jobs. At this point, I welcome my colleague, Mr. David Steinberg, to share information about Titles II and III.
Thank you, Dr. Wojcik, and thank you to the Board of Education for this opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about our title allocations. I'll be talking to you a little about Title II and Title III allocations. Title II allocations are used to support effective instruction, and this is a great opportunity for the district because we use this money to support our mentoring program. And this is a program where we're able to support our new teachers to the district. This year, we, I think, are north of 38 new teachers. We're able to provide each of those teachers with a direct mentee relationship, and we can support the stipends for 3 mentor coordinators who help us oversee this program in each of our levels. We also have money allocated in this Title II Part A for instructional coaching at our elementary schools, and along with some PD for differentiated instruction at our in-district private St. Edward's, the Confessor. Our Title III funding is broken into 2 categories, one for supporting English language learners, and the other is for supporting immigrant learners. The difference in those 2 groups is our English ELL learners are identified upon entering a district through a series of tests. We have a home language questionnaire that helps us to determine their home language. Through a series of NISOSLAT testing, we're able to determine then the level, and that helps us to understand what kind of supports need to be placed for them. This funding helps us to put those supports in place in the form of E&L tutors as we push in. Our Title III immigrant funding is also funding that's new to us this year as a district, and our immigrant students are identified primarily as students who were not born in any state here in the United States, but yet and have not attended one or more schools in any one or more of the states for more than 3 full academic years. So it's a slight difference. But again, our services, the title grant money, allows us to provide this push-in services, tutors to help support the students in this area. We currently, in the district, have 161 total immigrant students. We have 0 in the private, and in our ELLs, we're looking in the range of about 232 ELL students in the district as well. So at this point, I'm going to hand this back over to Dr. Wojcik to talk to you about Title IV funding. Thank you.
So Title IV grants are intended to support teaching and learning that provides enhancements to our academic programs. This year, we'll use Title IV funds to support professional development and curriculum writing and literacy in the elementary schools. Additionally, we will use the funding to support instructional coaching at the elementary level in conjunction with Title II funding. Finally, St. Edward is using their allocation to provide professional development in the area of social emotional learning. We hope that through this presentation, you can see the thoughtful planning that goes into allocations and distributions of funds to meet the needs of our students and staff. Thank you for your time and attention this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Steinberg and Dr. Wojcik, for your presentation and overview of the Every Student Succeed Act grants. Are there any questions from the board for the two of them? Dr. Park? How many, I missed the number, how many ENL students do we have in the district? You mentioned 30-something.
So that's a changing number. In the last check, it was about 232.
200.
Yeah, so that number will obviously fluctuate as we get new entrants into the district.
My second question is, I noticed that from year to year, our elementary school that's eligible for Title I changes. Are we at the border of that cutoff line? Is that why sometimes Village is in there, and this year we don't have Village in there, but Willits is in there?
So it has to do with the number of free and reduced lunch applications that are submitted within each building. And so based on that information, we use a formula to determine which students or which buildings meet criteria based on a specific percentage.
So it's determined by the number of lunches requested?
So they do. It's about targeted assistance. So we have a poverty rate percentage that's used as a determination, and those 4 schools are within the grade span above the average of the district poverty rate, which is 13.31%.
And do we encourage our families, if they need help, to actively pursue and ask for the lunch assistance? I mean, this seems like a great opportunity for us to have extra income.
Yes, our buildings do have support that through their social workers and psychologists who help families as they need it to fill out the applications.
No, I'll just add to that. Every year, the state recertifies folks who are already eligible so that they don't have to reapply. The state was late with doing that this year, so there may be a little bit of confusion. So we also send out applications for families to be able to take advantage of free and reduced price lunch. So that communication from the district just went out, and it was delayed this year because the state was delayed in doing their part. So the good news is no one loses eligibility because your last year's eligibility continues for 30 days into the current year. But we're going to make a special effort to make sure that parents know about it this year because it was a little bit irregular with the state.
Ms. Valco?
Slightly off topic, for those families that qualify for the free lunches, do we keep track just to see, offer other services for them if they need help with field trips or activities or other things that go on in the school district so they can take part?
Yes, so our building principals have that information and then support families as necessary, working in conjunction with the social workers in the buildings. And then I know our PTAs work with our schools to support students who may not be able to afford certain opportunities.
Okay, thank you so much again for your presentation. Okay, and then next we're moving on to Dr. Rogers' monthly superintendent's report.
So, Furkan, if you wouldn't mind just switching over to my presentation. So the frame for this is obviously the district has been informing the public of late of the vote on our facilities proposition, which is scheduled for October 1st. The reason for doing this is twofold. One, we are required by law every year to inspect our buildings and every 5 years to do a deep dive inspection. So you may recall in 2015, we did that deep dive inspection. It's called a building condition survey. That resulted in a list of work that the district needed to take on. The public approved that bond proposition, and we have been doing that work since. We've just completed the latest round of building inspections with our architects and engineers. They've identified a number of things for the district to give attention to in order to keep the buildings in good working order and safe for students and staff. And in addition, we as a district have experienced significant pupil growth over the past decade. So we're breaking trend with the county as a whole. The county as a whole has lost some population over the last decade, and Syosset has grown in population significantly over the last decade. So this will be, as it was in 2016, a fairly lengthy presentation. And I'll apologize in advance for that, but we want to be comprehensive because this will be the last opportunity at a board meeting. I know the board has been discussing this for over a year, but this is sort of the summary leading into October 1st. And I'll try and, we have, and thank you for the questions that we've been getting from the public. It's helped us shape our message so that we can make sure that we do the best job possible of educating the public so they can make the best decision possible.
Is this better? It's better for me too. It's like the other one had this awful echo and it was very distracting. So anyway, I was starting back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and then I kind of got up to where we are today. In all seriousness, just a quick recap in case it didn't get broadcast to folks who might be streaming. We're required by law every 5 years to work with our architects and engineers to do a facilities review. They are responsible for giving us a list of things that are needed to be done in order to keep the buildings in good working order, and we are responsible for making a plan for how we can keep our facilities safe and comfortable for students and staff. So the last time we did a big round of projects in response to these deep dive building investigations was back in the 2015 timeframe. We did a big project in 2016. And then the other thing that's happened in the decade since is that we've experienced a lot of student growth, a little bit in contrast to what's happening in the rest of the county. And I attribute that to the fact that we offer a wonderful Syosset education here, and that's made us an attractive place to move, but it has also resulted in some pupil growth here. And we did, the board at the beginning of this process a year ago asked us to commission a study to project our enrollment out 10 years into the future, and a lot of the design work that we've done in the time since is to address that enrollment study and the predictions that we have about where we're headed. So one thing I want to make sure is abundantly clear, sometimes when you're given two choices, you think it's either or. It's not either or, it's one or both. So the one would be Proposition 1, the both would be Proposition 1 and 2. And I've been using the metaphor, you can't build the second floor unless you build the first floor. And Proposition 1 is that first floor, it's the foundation. These are the repairs that were identified by the architects and engineers. These are the portable classrooms that were intended to last for 20 years, have miraculously lasted for 40 years, and I give a lot of credit to our maintenance staff for really doing an amazing job of getting double the useful life out of them. But we also know that those are not going to last forever, and they are towards the end of their life cycle. So replacing them is part of Proposition 1. Obviously, some expansion is necessary to accommodate our enrollment growth. We're always focused on safety and security upgrades. Those are also included in Proposition 1. Proposition 1 includes air conditioning for every gym, for one gym in every building in the district that does not have it already. And then lastly, there are a couple of projects in Proposition 1 that will improve busing safety and efficiency. Proposition 2 builds on that by adding a couple more things. It creates more flexible space in elementary schools, and gyms are the mechanism for that, but I'll describe in more detail how they function in that way, because it's really adding square footage, not necessarily adding a gym. You are adding a gym, but the point of the gym is to increase square footage, preparing for additional enrollment growth, and then upgrading turf fields at HBT, at the varsity softball infield and the varsity baseball infield. So Proposition 1 has to pass in order for Proposition 2 to also pass. So as I go through this presentation, you'll see what happens on each campus if Proposition 1 passes, and then how it's a little bit different if Propositions 1 and 2 both pass. So in detail, Proposition 1 has a series of projects. These architectural repairs, and I'll go into a little more detail on that on the next slide. At Berry Hill, Walt Whitman, Bayless, and Village, it is the replacement of 17 classrooms that are currently portable classrooms with permanent structures. At HBT, the architects identified that we have to take down the metal awnings that are over the front and back of the building because they've reached the end of their life cycle, and instead of just replacing them in kind, we propose taking the money that we would have used to replace them in kind and instead use that to build a security vestibule so that it's a safer entrance and better visitor screening at HBT. At HBT, we also propose a track. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that page in the presentation. At the high school, we're proposing an additional gym space. I'll talk a little more about that. Also at the high school, a guidance and wellness center and a larger robotics room. They're married together because the two spaces will actually swap and get larger by doing that swap. Building a new library in order to take the existing library, which is really shaped like classrooms, and turn it back into classrooms and create a library that's shaped like a library. And then rear bus loop, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail. Some building security enhancements, which I won't talk about in too much detail because doing so defeats their ability to keep us safe. So it's we are constantly on the hunt for new security technologies. When we identify a technology that we think will work with the physical plant that we have and keep us safer, we want to take advantage of that technology, but we don't want to disclose too much about our capabilities because it might help someone who's trying to build a plan to get around our capabilities. As I mentioned before, air conditioning in all of the gyms that don't have air conditioning now, one on each campus, a bus loop at South Grove, some elementary playground enhancements, and that's Proposition 1. The board, as part of constructing this, decided to use $4 million from our capital reserves, money that was intentionally set aside for capital work on the buildings, leaving $4 million also in the reserves. So for an emergency kind of a project. So using half of that reserve to offset the cost, so less of the cost falls to the property tax, but keeping a little bit aside in case something unexpected comes along. Proposition 2 would build on Proposition 1 by the addition of gyms at 4 elementary schools, Walt Whitman, Berry Hill, Robbins Lane, and Bayless, changing the infield of the proposed HBT track so that it was artificial turf and not natural turf, and then same with the baseball and softball varsity infields, turning those into turf, artificial turf as well. So we tried to estimate what the cost would be so that folks would have a sense of the magnitude of the impact on taxes. Proposition 1, for every $10,000 in school taxes, not in overall taxes, because overall taxes include county taxes, municipal taxes, but for every $10,000 in school tax, Proposition 1 would result in $211 of increased tax when fully phased in. And Proposition 2 would result in $76 of additional school tax, again, when fully phased in. Why do I say when fully phased in? We won't be able to start this work right away. It'll take probably a year for us to do design and then get a building permit from the State Education Department, which has to review and approve all of our designs. So we won't start the work until likely the summer of 2026. There may be some small projects we can start sooner than that. And school districts don't borrow all the money up front and then start paying the mortgage from day one. It actually works differently for school districts. What happens is we borrow the money just in time as we need it to pay bills. And so for a lot of these projects, if we're doing 5 years worth of work, it may be 5 years before we experience all of the costs that we need to make. So the $211 figure, $76 figure is an attempt to show what it's like when it's fully phased in, but that's not what it will be for the first several years. District-wide improvements, these were identified by our architects and engineers. There's actually a longer list than this, but the board asked our architects and engineers to pare the list down, the highest priority items that need to be addressed immediately in this round of funding. So we went back, we worked with them to identify the things that were the highest priorities that needed to be addressed now. The things that were postponed are not urgent and don't have to be addressed in this round of funding, and we can still be safe. But a lot of this work is exterior walls and repointing. These are buildings that have brick or some other kind of concrete exterior. Those exteriors have to be maintained or they lose water tightness. Once water gets behind the walls, lots of worse things happen. So keeping a watertight building is very important. Part of keeping a watertight building is roofing. 4 of the buildings are slated to have roof replacements. We have been replacing roofs right along for nearly all of the 10 years that I've been here. And these are larger jobs that need to be done with external financing. At all 3 of the secondary schools, we're proposing to renovate the locker rooms, which are in tough shape. And at HBT, there's a lot of site work that needs to be done. This is broken pavement, misaligned curbs, things that could present trip hazards, things that could present hazards for folks with mobility issues. It's a large campus and it hasn't been addressed in a while, so the site work is extensive. At the high school, renovation to some of the science rooms requires some new casework. The pool requires some attention to the air handling system there to keep the air comfortable for students to breathe while they're exercising, and some tile replacement, and then general air handling in the high school to keep the air circulation good there. The sources of funding, the district is in a situation right now where our reimbursement from the state is very high relative to what it has typically been. So for a long time, the state would only pay the district about 16 cents on the dollar. Right now, the state reimbursement is over 38 cents on the dollar. So it has started to drop. So I anticipate that it's likely that it may continue to drop. So if we take advantage of the current financing, the state's share of the cost will be the largest. If we choose to delay, then the state's reimbursement may be less than it is today. So the community share would be the $211 for every $10,000 worth of taxes figure that I shared before. That capital reserve offset is the $4 million that the board set aside, and that the remainder is the aid that comes to us from the state. So again, just to recap, there are a series of district-wide improvements. The gym air conditioning in the elementary schools that don't already have air conditioning, South Grove does, and 1 gym each in the 2 middle schools. The security enhancements, one of the enhancements is building envelope security. So the envelope means the ultimate perimeter of the building. So these would be doors, windows, those kinds of things. And then the security vestibule at HBT, so that we have a more secure way of vetting visitors before they come into the building. Exterior walls and repointing, every building requires it. 4 of the buildings need roofs, and as I mentioned, the locker room renovations. In Proposition 2, there are a series of 4 gym additions, and I want to just talk a little bit about the why behind this. So the schools are Bayless, Berry Hill, Robbins Lane, and Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman and Berry Hill are the schools that right now are the tightest buildings, and South Grove already has a larger gym and an air-conditioned gym. Willits and Village have been losing enrollment in the more recent history, and so unlike the buildings that have grown the most, so we're making a distinction there. The why in this is the additional square footage allows us to reprogram the interiors of the building. So each of the building's shapes is a little different, and when we get to the slides, I'll talk about some of the thought that went into how they were designed. But ultimately, the way to think of this is additional square footage frees up other space, meaning the old gym, for things like musical groups and rehearsals, on-site kitchens, student therapy spaces, future student growth, and additional indoor recess space for the inclement weather and the cold months. So this will be, additional space ends up being multi-purpose space. If you build classrooms, they can only be classrooms. If you build a space like a gym, it's a blank canvas because you can do lots of things in larger spaces, and it can be reprogrammed based on the needs of the building or how individual buildings may have slightly different needs. So by presenting the building principals with a space that is more flexible, they can make the best use of it for what the needs are of the individual buildings. They will also save us rented space for high school sports. So right now, we don't have enough gym space at the high school for the teams that we have, so we rent space from local churches and commercial recreational facilities in order to accommodate our own teams. So being able to accommodate them on our own campuses will keep them closer to home, easier to manage, less busing, and less cost on rent. It would also allow for additional intramural sports and a lot more community usage. One of the challenges that we have right now is we are constantly turning down community requests to use our facilities, specifically gyms, because we just don't have enough gym space to allocate to all of the requests that we receive. We certainly want to make our spaces available to adult education. We have a robust adult education program. We want to make sure that even folks who don't have children in schools are able to take advantage of our schools. And so this would create more space to be able to say yes to more of those programs. And then lastly, in each of the buildings, there are concerts and plays and graduation ceremonies that are events where there are large groups of parents, and a lot of the gyms currently don't lend themselves to these kinds of events well, either because of size or configuration. So having new space allows us to configure them better for those purposes. So Campus One, Bayless Elementary. In the middle, underneath the word elementary, are 2 pink classrooms. Those are the portable classrooms. So if only Proposition 1 passes, we'll remove those 2 classrooms and replace them with 2 classrooms in a different location, but essentially replace 2 for 2 in order to get rid of the portables. And then we would do the exterior wall repairs. If Proposition 2 passes, in addition to Proposition 1, this would change significantly. Instead of building 2 classrooms to replace the portable classrooms, those classrooms would instead be where the library is now. The library would go to where the cafeteria is now. The cafeteria would go to where the gym is now and become an all-purpose room. And some of that space would be allocated to a kitchen. And then we would build a new gym at the end of the building. So I think this is the best example of how adding a gym actually makes the rest of the building, allows us to repurpose and reallocate space in the rest of the building. So the library space becomes larger, the classroom spaces are next to other classrooms, and one of the things that the board has been talking about for a year now is trying to improve the quality of the food service program, and one of the strategies for doing that is creating more kitchen space on site at the elementary schools. Right now, the Bayless has the least capable kitchen space of all of our elementary schools. It really is just a warming table, and it's out in the middle of the cafeteria floor. There isn't even a separate room for it. So this would give us the ability to create some space to allocate to a kitchen, and over the course of time, as we add more elementary kitchens, we would be able to explore the board's request to consider having more on-site cook-to-order kinds of options for elementary schools. So this is just artist rendering of what the gym would look like at the end of the wing. And then next up is Berry Hill Elementary. And this is a more challenging project because Berry Hill is on a hill. And the top of the hill is almost completely occupied by the existing school, so there really is no room to do any additional construction there. And we need to replace the architects have identified the portables as being in need of replacement. And we are using all of them right now for students, and we can't afford not to have those classroom spaces. So the new classrooms that we have to build need to be somewhere else. As we went through design options, we hit upon the option of creating a building that goes down the hillside rather than up. So it goes up one story, but it also goes down one story. And what that does is it creates a classroom on the lower level, but it also creates an entrance to the building that is down at the playground level, the grass playground level where the swing sets are, and not the asphalt playground level, which is up significantly higher. So right now, the lower part of the playground is not very accessible to persons with mobility issues, whether they be students or family members or perhaps grandparents. So by creating this addition and tucking it down into the hillside, we would put an elevator in here, and then the elevator would make the back playground accessible, and it would make the upper playground accessible as well. So this is a total of 7 classrooms. They're just stacked on top of one another. So this will create a 2-story structure at the back, but the existing gym is almost as tall as this 2-story structure, so it won't seem visually any more imposing than the gym that's already there at the front of the building. If anything, it'll seem less imposing because it's towards the back of the building and won't, from a perspective, won't seem as large. If Proposition 1 alone is passed, we would remove and replace these the 7 portable classrooms with this new classroom addition, and we would repair exterior walls. If Propositions 1 and 2 are passed, we would do that, but we would also do, similar to what we propose in Bayless, create a new gym, then move some of the activities that go on right now in the current cafeteria and kitchen into where the existing gym is, use that also as a multi-purpose space, and then have additional room in the gym. So that would increase square footage that could be used for, again, music rooms, therapy spaces for students, assemblies, et cetera. This is, again, an artist's rendering of what that wing would look like to help you try and visualize the one flight that is below grade level, one flight that is at grade level, and then one flight that is above grade level. And this is an artist's rendering of what the gym would look like, the new gym would look like at the other end of the building, this is where the existing portables are now. At Robbins Lane Elementary, if Proposition 1 alone passes, air conditioning would be put into the existing gym, and we would do the exterior wall repair that needs to be done. If Proposition 1 and 2 are passed, and we would do all of those things, but in addition, we would create the new gym. We would also still convert, air condition the existing gym, but we would convert it to a multi-purpose space, and again, that would free up room to expand the kitchen and cafeteria. And this is an artist's rendering of what the gym would look like. For those who are familiar with Robbins Lane, you can visualize this is the space where the basketball hoops are now. So we would have to relocate the blacktop and the basketball hoops from where they currently are, but they wouldn't go away, they would just be relocated. At South Grove Elementary, this is a very constrained campus space-wise, and the drop-off in the morning results in cars and buses being in the same parking lot at the same time, and students have to cross the bus line in order to get from the car drop-off point to the main door of the building. So obviously we have a lot of staff out there to make sure that students cross safely, but it's always optimal to have buses and cars in different places. So to make this safer, we propose creating a bus loop at South Grove Elementary which would be behind the main part of the building. So this would come off of Colony Lane. The buses would have access to the loop. They would drop off onto a sidewalk on the back of the building. There are 2 doors that lead from that into the building proper. So it would be easier to do a dismissal from the gym because the door, one of the doors is right at the top of the ramp from the gym, and the other door is essentially going right into the center of the main building. So cars would then be able to do drop off in the front of the building. They would have access to the curb and the sidewalk, which they don't have now. And then buses would be in the back of the building, and no cars would be there to compete with the buses for access. And again, in Proposition 1, in addition to the bus loop, we would do the repair of the exterior walls. There's no gym air conditioning project here because the gym here already has air conditioning. This is Village Elementary. So at Village Elementary, the portables are on the right-hand side. There's a dotted line around them to represent the fact that they would be demolished. They would be replaced with the 4 pink, are they pink up there? Yes, pink looking portable classrooms at the left-hand side. And the playground that is currently adjacent to the road would be relocated much deeper into the property next to where those new classrooms would be constructed. The gym would be air conditioned, and the space that is freed up by moving the playground equipment and removing the portables could be turned into additional parking space at the building. One of the challenges with Village Elementary is the portable classrooms were constructed at a higher grade than the building proper. They're 2 steps up. Would have been better if they had been constructed at the same level as everything else, because then they would be accessible from the interior of the building to somebody who is in a wheelchair, for example, but they're not. So the new classrooms that we would construct would be, of course, at grade, so that there would be no mobility challenges accessing them. And then we would demolish the existing portables and take the resulting space and use it for parking. This is a picture of that 2-step grade to get up to where the portables are. There is no other way to get to the portables inside. So if somebody with a mobility challenge is at Village, they have to use an exterior ramp in order to get to the level of where the classrooms are. And this just, again, artist rendering that illustrates where the classroom addition would be on the end of that wing. It would just be 2 classrooms further out, 4 altogether on either side of the hallway with the playground equipment adjacent. At Walt Whitman Elementary, if Proposition 1 alone is passed, we'll remove the existing 3 portable classrooms, and those are the dotted lines that are underneath the word gym in the lower right-hand corner. So those are classrooms now. They would be demolished, and 4 new classrooms would be built on the north side of the building. That's on the left side of this drawing. Again, exterior wall repair and an extensive roofing replacement project. If Propositions 1 and 2 are passed, in addition to doing all of that work, we would create the new gym. That would allow us to relocate the cafeteria to the old gym. That would free up more space for kitchen and would create space for music, therapies, etc. So that classroom addition would be on the end of, as I said, the north wing. There's already 1 addition, so there's the original building. There was an addition that was constructed several decades ago, and then we would propose an additional addition adjacent to that. This is a picture of what the existing portables look like at Walt Whitman. And then this is a rendering of what the gym would look like, which would go where the portables are currently, at the top of the parking lot. I swear I'm only hitting the button once, and it's going many times. All right, so I see that somehow we lost the graphic that was supposed to be on this slide between creating it and getting it posted here. So this is not AP Willits Elementary. This is also Walt Whitman. Okay. Well, I promise that when we post it online, it will be right. But what's proposed at AP Willits Elementary is, again, exterior wall replacement, gym air conditioning, and then a new playground. So we would keep the existing playground, which is for more intermediate age students, and we would create a new playground, which is for more primary age students. That playground would be located next to the primary wing so that the students would be able to go right outside and immediately access it. Right now there's some swing sets there, so that those swing sets would be relocated, but we wouldn't relocate the existing swing sets. They're old. We would replace them. But it's not an extensive project at AP Willits, and we'll correct the drawing. As I mentioned earlier, right now the front of H.B. Thompson Middle School has a series of metal awnings that are showing their age, and they would be removed and replaced with a vestibule that would look and function like the vestibule at the high school does, so that visitors would be ushered into a holding area, and they would be vetted before they would be given access to the building proper. From an overhead perspective, just a list of drawings. So if Proposition 1 only passes, we would air condition the main gym. That's the one towards the front of the building. We would repair all of the exterior wall work that needs to be done. We would do all of that extensive site work that's required. We would remove the awnings. We'd add a security vestibule, renovate the locker rooms, and create a 6-lane track with a natural grass infield. If Propositions 1 and 2 are passed, in addition to all of the above, the natural grass infield would be replaced with an artificial turf infield that would allow the field to get more use. So this is a drawing of what that layout looks like. So this would go essentially adjacent to the fence, and the track would, right now, one of the things the board has consistently asked me to do over my 10 years here is make sure that for all of our elementary schools, no matter where a student lives, they get the same great elementary school program, and no matter where a student lives, to get a comparable program between the two middle schools. The one place where our program is not comparable between the two middle schools is our track and field, because our students at H.B. Thompson don't have access to a track, so they don't learn how to do hurdles, for example. They don't learn how to do relays because there's no way to support them. In fact, what happens is we paint white lines on the grass so that students have at least the experience of running an oval, but it doesn't support the track program in the way that Southwoods does, because it has access to the high school track. So what this would do is it would make the two programs more comparable. At Southwoods Middle School, not as extensive work to be done here. Air conditioning in the gym, also renovation of the locker rooms, which are in tough shape, and repair of the exterior walls and new roofing over a major section of the building. The high school, there's an extensive amount of work that makes sense. It's the largest building in the district by several orders of magnitude. So new student spaces would be a new main gym with bathrooms that would be facing the turf field and baseball field. A new library, which would allow us to convert the existing library into 6 classrooms. An expanded robotics room, and a guidance and wellness center that would consolidate all of the offices for the professionals who help our students stay mentally well. That would be our psychologists, social workers, guidance counselors, supervision, all in one place. Right now, those offices are throughout the building, and because there aren't waiting rooms for all of those offices, students lose a sense of privacy when they're waiting for an appointment with one of these helping professions. So by locating everything in a single place, students know they have one place to go for help. If one professional is in the middle of an appointment and can't see a student, there's someone else there who can step in and help that student as well. So it really creates a synergy, and a lot of school districts are approaching their wellness staff in a similar fashion. On the repair and maintenance side, as with other campuses, exterior walls repaired, replacing roofing, fixing the locker rooms, the casework, as I mentioned earlier, the pool ventilation and tiling, and air handling. I'll spend a couple seconds talking about the additional bus loading loop, and then I'll show you what it looks like. One of the challenges that we have with busing is that we're always focused on on-time performance. We know parents have plans for their young people after school, and when buses are late, those plans are interrupted. What happens is anytime buses are late from the high school, it's a cascading series of lateness. So late buses from the high school turn into late buses from the middle school, turn into buses that are not on time at the elementary school. And part of the reason why buses are often late at the high school is because we don't have enough space to load all the buses. So we have about 60 buses that load every day at the high school. We can't accommodate all of them in the loop at the same time. We can only do, 23, 24, 25. So we load 25 buses, they roll off. We wait for 25 more buses to take their place. Then students board them. Then they roll off. And then there's another round of buses that are the final series of buses to come in. So by creating more bus loading space, we think that we will improve our on-time performance all the way down the line because we'll be able to load all the buses simultaneously, have them depart simultaneously, have them get to where they're going sooner. So all of those are the things that would be in Proposition 1. If Proposition 2 is adopted in addition to Proposition 1, that would add just two things at the high school: artificial turf infields for the varsity softball and varsity baseball fields. One of the things that I've learned, I'm not a baseball or softball player, but a lot of our young people practice at club facilities off campus that are typically use artificial turf infields, and the advantage is they can be played on more often, and they have a truer bounce, so less irregular bounces of the ball. So we do not have an artificial turf infield, so sometimes students experience an irregular hop from the ball. Sometimes that, if you're not accustomed to that, it can produce injuries. So the hope would be that this would produce a playing surface that's similar to ones that students are experiencing elsewhere and be a safety improvement. So just to kind of illustrate where all of these things go, the science research program here has expanded dramatically in the last several years, which is great. We have lots of kids who want to do science research and compete, put their projects into competitions. We need more floor space for them, so we would expand that science research room. We need casework for that. The new gym, as I mentioned, would go right next to the existing gym and would have bathrooms that face the field and baseball area. The pool it's a venerable pool. It is holding up well, but it still needs maintenance. The locker rooms are in tough shape, and there are a lot of aspects of the locker rooms at the high school that no longer meet code, and so need to be addressed from a safety perspective. In the center of the building is where the guidance wellness center would go, and the robotics room would be adjacent to it. And a new library would be added at the perimeter of the building, and what that would do is free up the space where the existing library is to be converted back into classrooms so that we can accommodate what we anticipate will be about a 10% growth in enrollment by the time we get to the year 2030. The bus loading area, there are two of them. One's in the back of the building where the existing traffic circle is now. This is adjacent to the barn, across from the barn. And this would allow us to stage a series of buses all right next to one another. And then a little bit of additional space near where the pool is that would just, again, create a little bit of sidewalk and curb so that we could stage a handful more buses and load them all. This would give us the ability to have some of the buses exit out Pell Lane. That will take pressure off of the exit to the high school loop, which right now tries to support all of those buses rolling out a single entrance, a single exit to the school. And then just for location's sake, the two turf infields, varsity baseball lower right and varsity softball upper left. As the artist rendering of what the robotics suite would look like, we're taking advantage of a space in the building that has a high ceiling because a lot of the robotics work now is done on drones. And the artist rendering of what the new library would look like, again, a space purpose-built to be library space and take the existing space, which was originally purpose-built to be classrooms, and return it to classrooms. And rendering of what the new gym would look like. We talked about this extensively with the board. We looked at a bunch of different technologies. A lot of colleges are moving in the direction of what are these kinds of buildings, which are fabric over steel. They're more economical than doing traditional construction, and yet they perform very well and have a really long lifespan. So we get a lot of frequently asked questions. I'll just ask and answer 4 of them here. I'm sure the board will ask me to address some of their questions. And there's a more extensive FAQ document on our website. And as we take in questions from our facilities at syossetschools.org email address, we update the answers in the FAQ, and then we post a new copy of the FAQ online. And we'll also respond to the questions that we get by email. So one question is, when would the construction begin? The timeline for construction involves, we have the conceptual work done. So the conceptual work has to be turned into actual blueprints. That takes time. The blueprints then go to the state education department, and we have to wait for their approval. Some approvals can happen as quickly as 30 weeks. Some approvals take more like 40 weeks. So you obviously lose a lot of time while you're waiting for approvals to come from the state education department. Then we go through a bidding process. Then once we award the bids, we have to make sure that the contracts are signed, and the contracts can't be signed until all the bonds and insurances are in place. Then we get a construction schedule with the contractor, and then we start. So we're hoping there will be some smaller projects that we can start pretty quickly, but I think a bulk of the work would start in the summer of 2026. And we would phase the construction over the course of 5 years to make sure that we're doing our highest priority projects first, and moving through the work in a way that we can manage effectively. So doing all of the work at once, I don't think we'd be able to manage effectively, and we might not get as competitive pricing if we tried to do it all at once. How do we do construction with students in school? We rely heavily on our construction management firm. Before anything happens, there's a safety plan that is developed. That safety plan takes into account all of the things that we might discover when we open the buildings up that have to be remediated, how we'll keep workers separate from students and staff, how we'll mitigate things like dust, noise, et cetera during construction. We try to do as much as we can over the summer. Some things will take a whole year, so they can't just be done in a summer. So the building of the high school vestibule took over a year. The building of the fitness center took a year. The building of the South Grove corridor took us several months into the school year. So we've done this before. It can be done safely. Sometimes we'll do things weekends, second shifts, in order to, again, keep the occupants of the building safe when some of the heavier duty construction is taking place. How do we know we're getting the best price? So the numbers that were in this presentation that we've been sharing with the community are estimates. They're good estimates because they're developed by seeing neighboring school districts go out to bid and what the bids are coming in at. So for similar work in a neighboring district, this is what the bids are coming in at. But the construction market is a variable market, and things go up and sometimes things go down. So typically what happens is, over the course of lots of projects, some of the ups and downs balance each other out. But the one thing the public needs to understand is that we're required by law to take the lowest responsible bid. So whatever is out there in the marketplace, whatever contractors are bidding on the work, the lowest bid is the bid that we will take, because that's the bid we're required to take. So, and then, just a question about why this is so extensive. The district has over 1 million square feet of building under management, and believe it or not, more than 80% of that space is over 65 years old. So nearly all of the physical plant is approaching 70 years of age. So as these physical plants age, they're just going to require a lot more attention. The district was able to manage with maintenance for a long time. Other districts typically do more sequences of bond issues, roughly on an every 10-year cadence. We were not doing that for a couple of decades. So that means our maintenance was working, but now it means we have to catch up on some of this work. And that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to take questions.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Rogers. That was very comprehensive. Are there any questions for, okay, Ms. Abramson?
Does it work? I actually, does it work? Should I just yell? Can you hear me?
No, but people can see your mic. Can you hear?
Okay.
Try mine. We know mine works.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I have two things. The first was, on the Robbins Lane Elementary page, on Prop 1 and 2, it says convert existing gym to an air-conditioned multi-purpose space with room to expand. In the other gym expansions where we turn the existing gym to an all-purpose room, we didn't mention the air conditioning in that room, and a lot of them are not currently air conditioning. So I just wanted to confirm that all those spaces will be air conditioned. And my second point was, in the estimates, when you do construction, incidental things happen all the time. Do we take those into consideration when we do all of our estimates so that when little things come up, when medium-sized things come up, we are kind of covered and we're not going, oh my God.
So let's see if this one works. It does. Okay, so yes, and thank you for noticing that. I tried to be comprehensive, but all of the old gym spaces will be air conditioned no matter what they're converted into in the future. So that is incorporated in Proposition 1 and will happen no matter what. So if it's converted into an all-purpose room, it'll be an air-conditioned all-purpose room. And so we'll go through and review the presentation and make sure that's clear on every slide in case we missed it on a couple of slides. So thank you for picking that up. And secondly, yes, there are contingencies built into all of these estimates. So we build in a handful of different contingencies. One is contingency for things we discover, conditions. So that might be asbestos that we weren't expecting to find somewhere that needs to be remediated. We have a design contingency. So that is if we realize that we have to redesign something either for code or because we discover something in the ground that's not movable, like a sewer that wasn't on a chart or something like that. So we have a design contingency. And we have just a general contingency, and then we have an inflation contingency because we know we're not going to start until 2026. So we have pricing from today's contracts with neighboring school districts, but we're not going to be doing our construction for a year and a half. So we're putting a year and a half worth of CPI inflation into those numbers as well. So yes, we have a lot of contingencies built in there.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Rogers. So at South Grove, I love that we have our construction bus loop to alleviate, obviously, the safety, the traffic, the kids crossing the road. I know also at Berry Hill, we have that left that's very backed up all the time. The cars are in the middle of the road. A lot of the traffic is coming from south to north. With the new configuration of the building, will there be any loop or any redirection of the traffic there to alleviate that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we did a significant project with the Berry Hill loop and parking lot in the last round that we did. So we relocated the loop. We created a longer sidewalk for more bus drop-offs. And there was like a dogleg parking lot on the northeast side of the building. We straightened that out and made it a single straight parking lot. So we did as much as we could with the space that we had available, but Berry Hill is a tough property because there's so little property at the top of the hill. It's actually a fairly generous piece of property, but all of it is at the bottom of a slope. So we won't be able, we did as much as we could with the parking and the loop the last time around, but I don't see any additional efficiencies to be gained there.
And my other question was, at the high school, again, I'm so happy that we would have that staging area. Will that also alleviate for the parents or anybody else to kind of move the cars through there at drop-off?
it won't improve. Let me trying to think of a way I can say this succinctly. There may not be a succinct way to say it. At the end of the day, the buses are the priority, and we need every square inch of curb space that we can get to load buses. But the faster the buses get off the campus, the sooner the parents can have the curbs. So right now, the parents have to wait for 3 rounds of buses to use those curbs to load. If we only have to load from the curbs once, the parents should be able to get their 2 rounds of buses sooner to the curb. So buses still have priority, buses still go first, but if the buses clear out faster, the parents can have it faster. And if you have been to the high school drop-off in the morning, as soon as the buses are done dropping off in the inner loop, we open it up to cars, and then we have 3 loops of cars coming through the inner loop, the outer loop, and the visitor loop. So we would do the same thing at the end of the day once the bus is clear.
Thank you for the very thorough description. Just to dot the I and cross the T, you mentioned there are 4 elementary playground upgrades. We only discussed 2, Village and Willett. The other 2 would be
So part of this is leaving ourselves some flexibility to see which we're in a replacement cycle of playgrounds. So what we did the last time around was we identified the playgrounds that were in the worst condition and that did upgrades to those. So I'm going to look at Megan and Kevin because they may be aware of which of the playgrounds are the ones most in need of renovation.
Can you hear me? Okay. Robbins Lane is one that would be getting a playground, so if Prop 2 went through, we would be relocating that. So it would be Robbins Lane, Village, the other 2 are AP Willits. There's one more. Dr. Rogers, you remember the 4th one?
I'm trying. While they're looking, I'll take other questions. We'll come back to it. One way or another, we'll add a slide that has the 4 playgrounds that are on there.
So it's not a question. I'm just going to add a comment because you, in a matter of 20 minutes, summed up over a year's worth of work that we did. It's super impressive. But one fact I just want to throw out there is the fact that we have these exterior gyms being built on some of the buildings and some of the elementary schools also allows for safety of when there are days that are voting days or anything. You know, if we want to have, the schools want to have something during the day where adults have to come into the school, it allows them to section that part of the building off, and they no longer have to have adults roaming through the buildings to get into central gym spaces. So having the exterior gyms is a big safety bonus for those elementary schools as well, besides all of the other bonuses that it offers.
That's right, and thank you for raising that point. I wish I had I wish I had remembered to make that point, but I'm glad that you made it instead. But I'll just illustrate it. I think Walt Whitman Elementary is the best example. Right now, the gym is a completely interior contained space. We asked the Board of Elections if they would allow us to if they would please stop using Walt Whitman Elementary School as a polling site. They said no, politely, but they said no. And we did go through some of the other buildings. It was possible in Village, for example, to use the all-purpose room cafeteria because it has an exterior entrance. So they let us reconfigure where the polling site was there so that we got it out of the interior gym. But here at Walt Whitman, there's no way to do that. So even though we close on the main election day in November for staff training, we still had to do 3 primary elections this year. So in a year, like a presidential year, we may have as many as 3 primaries, and we have no way to not do it. So the way these external gyms are constructed, so this would be the 4 elementary gyms and the new gym at the high school, they're constructed so that the door from the hallway to the main building is an exterior door. So you go down the hallway, you arrive at the door, you're just as locked out as you would be, whether you're in the hallway or you're the outside of the building, you can't get to the building. So it makes it a safer place to hold an election, but it also means that if there's a community use of the facility, like CYO basketball is in there or something, CYO basketball doesn't have access to the entire building, they just have access to the gym. So now we don't have to have as much security there, as much custodial support. It makes it cheaper to let people use it, it makes it safer, and then we don't have to worry about folks roaming around the building. So this is a big thing at the high school, to be able to airlock the gym from the rest of the building, so it can be programmed completely separate of the staffing plan for the rest of the building. So thank you for raising that point.
Yes, the 4 playgrounds are at Robbins Lane, South Grove Village, and AP Willits.
Okay, thank you, Megan, and thank you, Dr. Rogers, again, for your comprehensive presentation. And again, for the community members, any questions, please feel free to send them to facilities@syosseschools.org, and we will try our best to answer the questions, and also post the questions on the website FAQ. Okay, and moving on to the next agenda item, Board of Education update, there's none. And there are no legislative items, and then we are going to do our discussion items. And the first item on the list will be the NYSSBA voting delegate and alternate. Can I have a volunteer from the board to be the voting delegate at the annual business meeting? Dr. Park, thank you so much for being the voting delegate. And then now we need an alternate. Anyone would like to volunteer to be the alternate in case Dr. Park could not make it? And the annual business meeting is going to take place on October 10th at 4 p.m. And it's virtual. Mr. Grieco? Thank you.
I'll do it as long as Dr. Park promises that she'll be there. Right. The last meeting was 8 hours, Dr. Park.
Okay, thank you so much both for your time. And then the second item, second discussion item is the discussion of the proposed NYSSBA resolutions. So we will, there are more than 30 resolutions on this packet. I don't think we'll have a chance to go through all of them, so I'm just gonna ask if anyone has anything that they want to discuss about these resolutions, or anything that you feel that you want the board to vote differently from the NYSSBA's recommendation, we can talk about it now. This way, our voting delegate, Dr. Park, would know how to vote at the annual business meeting. Anyone? Ms. Falkov?
That work? Okay, so going in order, in order of them. Resolution 11, they took no position. And should I read out what it is? Or, so it was resolved that NYSSBA urged the governor of New York State, the New York State Legislature, and the New York State Education Department to prioritize the human resources, processes, and programs that will ensure school districts can receive necessary building permits within 6 months of submission of capital improvement plans. And I think that we should support that, especially with all of our facility programs going on. I think that we can only benefit by guaranteeing that we get our permits and all of our necessary approvals within 6 months. I'm not quite sure why they took no position on it, but I think we should support it, especially in light of our facility projects.
So since I was the delegate last year, and we don't have Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association's, their analysis yet. Resolutions 1 through 25 are actually supported by NYSBA. They have a separate DEI committee. So that second line about no position, that's the DEI committee review. But for the purpose, Dr. Park, we're following NYSBA. We're not following the DEI committee.
Okay, that should have been clearer so we knew. Now I have to go back over my very careful notes. It didn't say that.
Anyone else? Mr. Gricko?
On that same point, Dr. Park, Resolution 16, the DEI committee actually opposes what NYSBA did. So that's another example of where we're going to go with what NYSBA says, not what its committee says. So, I mean, for 1 through 25, I think we're just going with what NYSBA is proposing. So I have a couple on the ones that NYSBA did not support that I think we should support. I mean, there's a few, but I'll go over number 28, which is a resolution that says that the association shall advocate for a new foundation aid formula to be voted on by the legislature and not through regulatory actions of NICED. And, you know, my understanding of this is NYSBA's reason for not supporting this is because of the way these regulations and the foundation aid formula is actually formed by the state, whether it's the legislature or it's NICED. And they sort of punt the issue, but I don't see any reason why not to support that concept. It goes to the idea that we're on Long Island and our local legislatures are really the ones that should be speaking on our behalf. So any of these resolutions that NYSBA does not support, but that talk in terms of what local interests of Long Island, it's my understanding that Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association would probably have supported this one and a few of the other ones, and since we don't have the benefit of their executive committee recommendations and then I guess their annual meeting, I think 28 should be one of the ones we do support, and I feel the exact same way on number 30, which is more in terms of whether or not we should advocate for local control over the educational administration by school boards and the county executive, not necessarily the state. NYSBA is just advocating when legislation is passed. So if NYSBA believes that the New York legislature is making a determination that helps all of New York State but completely burns Long Island, I'd like to think that NYSBA would take the position that no, you should be looking to your local legislatures to make these determinations. So for 28 and 30, I would vote to support, and as I assume the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association will do the same.
Does anyone have any questions on 28 in terms of voting to support it? So we okay? Are we all okay? Can I have a consensus to, Dr. Parr, you would like to make some comments? Okay, so 28, we're all good, right? So Dr. Park, for 28, resolution 28, that's going to be support. Okay, and so for resolution number 30, you have questions? Okay.
I disagree with what Brian said. I think it is a little shaky for each district to formulate their own governing rules. We should have more central instruction from, I will feel more safe that it comes from the state rather than just district making whatever fits us better or serves us better. The time, it may be different for different times.
So I guess I'm a little bit more clear. These resolutions will give NYSBA sort of a mandate on how they'll react to legislation that affects schools. So I think this resolution would be giving them the mandate to focus on the kind of issues that are local to make sure that the state focuses on the local nature of those issues, like the impact of salt on Long Islanders versus the impact of SALT on Buffalo. No offense. It's a general resolution to sort of give NYSBA its thinking for when these kind of laws are floating through the legislature.
Okay. I actually, for Proposition 30, agree with Shani. I agree that I think that, because this is about education administration, it's not about something like SALT. So it's different lanes. And I think in terms of education administration that there should be a form of central overhaul guidance for the state. So I agree with Shani about it.
And for this one, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Grickel. I would also oppose this because different districts, different counties and different districts vary in size and resources and also challenges. And so school board members were elected by the local community and will align with the best interests for the students, community, teachers as a whole. And then to have a centralized guidance from New York State Ed, in this case, it's really for the best interest for the community. And then in the past, when we have a different, when the board or the community has different opinions from the state Ed, we would, as together as a board, have Dr. Rogers send a letter to New York State Ed or to legislature or to these different government agencies on behalf of the board, and I thought that was working. So for this one, I would say that we oppose the resolution. I don't know if anyone else would like to.
So I'm kind of agreeing with what everybody is saying up here, but the only thing that I think is important, maybe we can, because you have the chance, am I right, Mr. Greco, that you have the chance to discuss the resolutions at that meeting? So it might be a good point just to bring up, not so much that you're supporting the way this resolution is stated, maybe it's important to state that the state should be aware of the fact that the guidelines that they pass as a state, they have to take into account the difference between the school districts that are in the northern part of the state, the central part of the state, and then the city schools, and then Long Island. It's almost like you have these different regions and you have very different demographics in all the regions. So maybe the point here is just for the state to be aware that when they pass these guidelines, how it's gonna affect the different areas of the state and whether or not it's an overall good decision, or they have to be mindful of the different areas, that's all.
I actually think the resolution captures that well because it ends with when appropriate. And what it's really saying is when it's appropriate to involve local interests, the state should look to the local interests for making these determinations. In this instance, it would be NYSBA that would decide, and NYSBA is already opposing this, so I assume they would not be using that as a sword. They would be using it when they thought it was necessary.
For this one, can I have a consensus to oppose or to support? Pick one. Okay, anyone supporting this? Two, right? 3 support? And then oppose? Yeah.
So Lynn and I were just saying we support a discussion for this to be discussed and brought up, but I'm not sure as is worded, we would support as is. I think the foundation of this, the idea of it is good, but I'm not sure support it as it's written. Does that make sense?
So it's very possible that there'll be amendments, and maybe educational administration will change. So I think we can give Dr. Park the ability that if it gets loosened somewhat and doesn't feel like it's telling the governor that we want the local school boards making all decisions, maybe then you can support it. But if it stays in its current form, you can oppose it.
We all good with that? Okay, Dr. Park? Clear on that, right? Okay, sounds good. All right. Any other resolutions that anyone wants to discuss?
So Resolution 36, I'm always of the opinion that training for professional obligations and additional training to keep everybody fresh and most up to date on regulations, requirements, and all the responsibilities of this position would be more useful. So I see that NISBA takes the point of view that it should be locally decided by local school boards as opposed to being advocated by NISBA. I actually don't agree. I think the vast majority of the time local school boards will try to avoid giving themselves extra mandates just generally across the state. So I would be in favor of the resolution, and if we can't get a consensus to have the resolution be backed at NISBA, then maybe we should all talk about getting extra training ourselves locally.
Does anyone want to make any comments on this one?
Last year, there was a similar resolution that got shut down as well. They requested I get like 8 hours of training, additional training, and that was completely shut down. And I think most of the districts, when I went for the discussion part in Nassau, Suffolk County, was not favored at all. I think it will be just up to us to do our training and get our continuing education.
So at the actual business meeting for NISBA, this was one of the last ones discussed, so they probably carved out 20 seconds to discuss it. They just went to a vote. So no one got to speak as to whether it was a good idea to advocate that the legislature pass laws on this. But it wasn't thrown out as a hand. There was no real discussion on the issue, and I don't think it's a bad idea to advocate that the state should implement some kind of training for school board members. I think the existing training right now is somewhat useless. And I would say that at the meeting if I was there, but I'm not going to be there, right, Johnny? It's I think important to advocate for these things. It's not NISBA making the regulation. It's NISBA just advocating in their policy role to let the legislature know that that's something that's on their mind.
Ms. Abramson?
Respectfully, Mr. Greco, I disagree. I think the actual training in the beginning was helpful. I don't think that we should advocate for statewide testing, kind of to your point about the different areas having different needs. If you wanted to talk about different training based on what our particular district was going through or something that was pertaining to us or helpful for our district, that's something I guess we could discuss locally, but I don't want to be told, I mean, what we did as the initial training to get you familiar with how boards work and things that I wouldn't have known otherwise was great, but to say that there's one thing that we all need to do wouldn't make much sense because everyone is going through different things in their district and it wouldn't pertain to everybody.
Anyone else? Okay. I also remember that this resolution was on the table last year too, and then we didn't get the consensus. We couldn't get a consensus on the board last year, so I just want to, get the consensus to see how everyone feels about this. Do we support more training coming from NISBA? 1, 2, 3. Mandated though. Mandated by the state, by NISBA.
So currently there is mandated training when you get on the school board. This would be pushing for some form of annual training, updated training, whatever it may be, to be required as well. So the question is, do we want to tell NYSBA that we support this and support them asking for more training?
Want to make a comment?
I think it is important for board members of all districts to be educated in the rules and what we are here for and how we can serve our community and students better. And that will make our job easier too when all the board members are in sync with what the goals are and how we can achieve that. From last year's discussion, I just felt that that was going to be shut down. So we can support and we can go for it, but I don't expect it to be passed.
Can I have a consensus to support this? The mandate, NYSBA mandate, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, okay, so Dr. Park, at the resolution, at the business meeting, we'll just vote to support that, okay? Are there any resolutions that anyone wants to discuss or raise any questions? Okay, all right, so Dr. Park, is it clear? Okay, great. All right, so Dr. Park was taking notes, I saw that, so she knows how to vote on behalf of our school district. Okay, the next item is going to be the legislative meeting, and Mr. Ostrich went to a virtual meeting, and then can you give us a brief update?
Sure. So I attended a virtual meeting with about a dozen members of school boards, administrators, and local legislators, including, that was hosted by Congressman Swazi's office. A number of important concerns were raised about how Congressman Swazi could advocate for local issues in New York, particularly on Long Island, that were facing districts. So some of the things that were covered were the zero-emission bus mandate that's coming from New York State, and some of the concerns related to the expense of districts, both in lost revenue and in terms of the additional expense for converting their fleets, as well as some of the infrastructure that's required to support the buses, which actually, was an interesting fact, are considerably heavier. So some of the district infrastructure, in terms of weight, there's going to be a significant amount of infrastructure build that is passed down without sufficient state funding. There were further questions about the state aid formula rewrite that's coming from the Rockefeller Foundation, and in general, the expiry of certain federal categories of aids, especially IDEA aid that's coming down. There were a number of districts that were advocating for a couple of changes regarding both getting additional funding from the federal government for IDEA, changing some of the way per capita funding for special ed was being calculated, and trying to adjust for case-based, in other words, per student, instead of, right now it's being calculated per student, and they were advocating for changes that would take into account the severity gradations of cases instead of just per student. And the last thing that I remember was about the E-rate program, which is related to, I think it's related to broadband in rural districts more so, and other security, cybersecurity funding. And that I think there's an expiry of the E-rate program that's coming at the federal level, and asking for Congressman Swazi to co-sponsor bills that might preserve some of that funding. One last thing, which is, I think this group is going to meet periodically, and so if it's helpful for the board, I can continue to represent us at those meetings, or if we want to appoint someone else and we want to rotate, that's fine too, whatever is helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Ostrich, for the update, and also When the emails comes in for the meeting, I will inform the board, and we'll take it from there. Okay, thank you again. And so this closes the discussion items. There's no unfinished business, and we are going to do our regular business. And 11A is the approval of the appointment of staff changes. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 11B is the approval of stipends and hourly rates 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 11C is the abolishment of positions, civil service. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 11D is the approval of the district-wide school safety plan. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? Mr. Ostrich.
Yes, regarding the school safety plan, I'm just wondering, I know we opened up comments to the public to receive feedback on some of the school safety plan. I'm just wondering if we received anything helpful and what the back and forth, if any, had been, and whether or not we were incorporating any changes or suggestions that might have been made.
We did get some comments. Some of the comments are, we're in a position now where we're going to be able to incorporate, I think, some of it not into the safety plan, but into the practices that the district has. So it's not the comments were good comments, they just weren't appropriate for the safety plan. They're appropriate for how we manage the safety plan. There were other comments that required us to do more research with our attorneys to see whether they belong in the safety plan or whether they belong in policy. So that work started over the summer, but it hasn't been completed yet.
I think when we have collaborative feedback in and out and we're participation in decision-making, we just end up making better decisions. So I'm glad to know that people are writing in and following things at home and participating.
All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 12A and 12B can be taken together. They are the approval of the Committee on Preschool Special Education and the Committee on Special Education Recommendations. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13A is the authorization of service contracts. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Levitan, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? Mr. Greco.
I apologize in advance for picking one contract out of the long list. The Plainview Chinese Learning Center, Inc. Contract, the $15K in revenue. Obviously, I'm all for revenue and I'm all for renting our space when it's not being used by our students. Is this for next summer or is this for during the school year?
I'm going to let Dr. Rufo answer this question.
Thank you. This is a school year program that's starting, I think, in the end of September.
Okay, all in favor? Oh, you have a question too? Okay.
So I see that we have, we're awarding UPK contracts. Can you, I guess I never fully appreciated or understood the details of how placement in the UPK programs work. Is it purely by lottery? Are there, do the local providers have the opportunity to select students? How does it work in terms of selection at any individual program?
So I'll take the first stab at this, and then Dr. Wojcik will step in if I misstep anywhere along the way. The UPK program is governed by state rules. The state rules are fairly extensive and prescriptive. So the seats must be allocated by a lottery system, and that's the only way they can be allocated. So the way the lottery system works is we have a lottery that ranks everybody by the order in which they were picked out, and then the first person on the list gets their choice of any space in any facility. So they'll always get their first choice. The next one gets the pick of what's left after that, all the way down until the end. So obviously we're not waiting for people to pick. We're asking people to give us their first, second, third, fourth, fifth choice. And then when the lottery is picked, everyone is ranked, then we go through and just match people to their highest ranked choice that remains available in the pool of seats that we have with the different providers. So we're fortunate in that the number of seats that we have has gone up, so we're no longer turning anyone away, so that's the good news, but there are certainly people who may not get their first choice because their first choice was taken by the time we got to their lottery figure. One thing that's, again, this is a very new program to us, so every year we encounter one or two new things that we have to think through. So one of the things that we do the lottery fairly early in the spring because parents are understandably trying to make plans for where their children are going to be in the fall, and they don't want to be without options. So we try to make sure that we help parents do that planning. And then we'll have people who move into the district after the lottery has occurred, and they'll want to know how they can take advantage of this now that they're residents. So again, we're fortunate in that we'll have some turnover in the list as the year goes on, and we're able to accommodate people even if they've moved into the district after the lottery has taken place. And what we don't do is if a seat becomes available somewhere, we don't shuffle someone off the list because it might have made their higher choice seat available. We just allocate that seat back to the pool if there's a cancellation, as otherwise the whole list could be shifting and parents wouldn't know where they were. So we run the list once, and then every time there's a vacancy, the person at the bottom of the list has the opportunity to take that vacancy. Did I miss anything?
I think the only thing I would add is that we have an independent auditor who observes us as we do the lottery to ensure that it's completely equitable.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13B.
Sorry, before you move on, I should just, since we're on universal pre-K, the $10,000 per student grant, this is the implementation of the $900,000 grant that Ms. Wojcik and others worked on to get to the district. So this is now how that gets allocated among those providers. They'll have some seats that are at $5,400 and some seats that are at $10,000, and that's the $10,000 seats are the ones from that $900,000 grant that we were awarded.
Good, thank you, Dr. Wojcik. Okay, all right, 13B is the authorization for special education and or nursing contracts. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13C is the authorization to participate in joint municipal cooperative bidding program, HVAC services. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13D is the authorization to participate in the Cooperative Omnia HD Partners Contract number 16154 purchasing program. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13E is the authorization for piggybacking with Copiac Union Free School District custodial equipment purchase, service, and repair bid. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13F is the award of Nassau County Director of Schools Facilities Purchasing Consortium Cooperative Bids 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13G is the adoption of grants. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Mr. Ostrich. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13H is the approval of student club charters 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13I is the disposal of broken, surplus, and/or obsolete equipment, supplies, and books. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and next we're moving on to audience to the public. And I'm going to, please bear with me, I'm just going to read the procedures. The Syosset Board of Education and Administration welcome attendance at Board of Education meetings. The board business meeting will be live streamed and recorded. A link to access the live stream is available on the district website at the following URL, which can be found on the district website. The BOE values community input and provides opportunities to offer that input via email or in person. Persons who wish to speak during audience to the public must register online to speak in advance of the meeting by 5 p.m. the day of the BOE meeting. A link to